My name is Bella Adams. I am 32 years old, living a quiet life in Nashville, Tennessee. 14 months ago, my sister overdosed. She left behind newborn twins. My parents stood in the hospital and begged me to adopt them. They claimed they were too old for the burden. I took those babies in, signed the papers, and paced the floors with them through every brutal night of their withdrawal. 1 year later, at their first birthday party, my mother stood in front of 40 guests and handed me an envelope instead of a gift. Inside was a lawsuit for emergency full custody of the children she had thrown away. What my husband pulled out of his leather bag a few minutes later made my mother lose her lawyer on the spot, and it cost my parents everything. Before we get to that backyard ambush, welcome to Sophia's Vengeance. If you appreciate stories where the truth outsmarts toxic family members, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below and tell me your age and where you are listening from right now. Let me take you back to the beginning. The midnight phone call came on a Tuesday in November. The hospital waiting room smelled like industrial bleach and burned coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sickly pale glow over the vinyl chairs. My sister Clara was gone. Down the hall in the neonatal intensive care unit, her twins Leo and Lily were fighting through their first hours of life, shivering from the substances left in their tiny systems. I sat next to my husband Liam. He is 34, a forensic accountant who reads spreadsheets the way other people read novels. He was quiet, his hand resting steady over mine. Across from us sat my parents Patricia and Gerald. My mother was not crying. Her makeup was flawless. She kept checking the screen of her phone, her thumbs swiping in short, irritated motions. She was not processing the loss of a daughter. She was calculating the optics of the mess Clara left behind. Gerald sat beside her, staring at his loafers, letting his wife steer the ship, just like he had for 30 years. Patricia locked her phone and looked at me. Her voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "We are too old for diapers, Bella. We cannot do this. If you do not take them, the social workers said they go into the foster system tomorrow morning." She delivered the ultimatum like she was deciding what to do with an expired lease. There was no hesitation, no grief, only a frantic need to offload a liability before it stained her reputation. I looked at Liam. We had only been married for 3 years. We had not planned on children yet, let alone twins requiring complex medical care. But Liam stood up, walked over to the glass window overlooking the incubators, and watched the 2 tiny chests rising and falling under the tangle of wires. He turned back, met my eyes, and gave a single nod. The decision was made. We would take them. An hour later, a nurse brought us the discharge paperwork and a small plastic bag holding the twins' hospital keepsakes. Inside were 2 tiny yellow medical tracking bracelets. Patricia suddenly stood up, smoothing her blouse. "Let me hold the girl for a quick photo," she said. She did not ask how Lily was doing. She just scooped the fragile newborn from the nurse, held her up to the harsh light, and forced a tragic, brave smile while Gerald snapped a picture on his phone. In her clumsy posing, Patricia knocked the plastic bag off the tray table. The yellow bracelets spilled out. One hit the cold linoleum floor near her heel. She glanced down, saw the yellow band, and then looked right back up at the camera. She did not bother to bend down. It was just trash to her. She handed Lily back the second the photo was taken, grabbed her purse, and told us they would be in touch. They walked out of the double doors without a backward glance. I knelt on the cold floor and picked up the yellow bracelet. I wiped the dust off the plastic, tracing the smudged ink of Lily's birth weight. I slid it into my pocket. It was a silent promise. They were mine now, and I was going to protect them from the very people who walked away. The first 90 days dismantled us down to the studs, Bringing Leo and Lily home from the hospital felt less like a homecoming and more like setting up a triage center in our living room. Neonatal abstinence syndrome is a clinical phrase that fails to capture the visceral reality of a newborn navigating withdrawal. Their tiny nervous systems were misfiring, punishing them for a dependency they did not ask to inherit. The cries were not normal newborn fusses. They were sharp, piercing shrieks that cut straight through the drywall of our quiet Nashville house and settled deep in my bones. Liam and I divided the nights into jagged 2-hour shifts. We operated on a dangerous deficit of rest and black coffee that tasted like battery acid by the 4th reheat. I am a pediatric physical therapist. I know how to soothe infants. I know the swaddle techniques, the pressure points, the gentle rocking rhythms. Yet none of my professional training mattered at 2 o'clock in the morning when Leo went into full-body tremors. His little spine would go rigid as a board. I walked circles around the living room rug until the fibers wore flat, humming songs I could barely remember the words to, praying for his muscles to relax. The financial reality hit us just as hard as the physical one. We had comfortable careers, but we had not prepared a nursery, let alone a medical sanctuary. The twins needed hypoallergenic, ready-to-feed formula because their recovering stomachs could not tolerate powder. Those small plastic bottles cost a small fortune. Then came the copays for the pediatric specialists, the specific preemie diapers, the sheer volume of supplies required to keep 2 recovering infants thriving. We watched our savings account drain hundreds of dollars, vanishing every week. We did not care about the money. We only cared about keeping them breathing. Liam was the anchor. My husband spends his days tracing hidden assets and unraveling corporate fraud. He operates in a world of logic and predictable outcomes. Raising withdrawing twins was chaos, but he stepped into the storm without a single complaint. He mapped out medication schedules on a dry erase board and tracked ounce intakes with the precision of a tax audit. One night around 3 o'clock in the morning, it was his shift. I woke up to the sound of rare, unsettling quiet. I slipped out of bed and walked down the hall. The kitchen was illuminated only by the faint green light of the microwave clock. Liam was standing at the counter, holding a bottle in the warmer. His eyes were shut tight. His chin rested on his chest. He had fallen asleep standing straight up, his hand still gripping the plastic bottle to test the temperature. I watched his chest rise and fall, the dark circles under his eyes resembling bruises. I walked over gently, took the bottle from his hand, and guided him back to bed. He did not even wake up. He just collapsed onto the mattress. That was our daily reality. Bone-deep, hollowed-out fatigue. If you looked at my mother's social media pages, however, you would think she was enduring the martyrdom of the century. While Liam and I were drowning in dirty burp cloths and medical bills, Patricia was busy curating a digital performance. She turned my sister's tragedy into her own personal stage. I remember sitting in the rocking chair at 4 o'clock in the morning, Lily finally asleep on my chest. I opened my phone to stay awake and saw Patricia's latest post. It featured a beautiful filtered photo of Clara from high school paired with a long, agonizing paragraph about the heavy weight of a mother's grief. The post ended with a plea for prayers for her precious orphaned grandbabies. The comment section was a flood of sympathy. Women from her church group offered their condolences. They posted prayer hands. They talked about the casseroles they were dropping off at her house to comfort her during this dark season. Patricia lived 15 minutes away from us. She received an outpouring of food flowers and emotional support. Not a single Tupperware container ever made it to our doorstep. She never once called to ask if Liam or I had eaten a hot meal. She never offered to come over and hold a wailing baby so I could take a 10-minute shower. She soaked up the community goodwill and the sympathy cards while we rationed sleep and watched our checking account shrink. When she did decide to grace us with her presence, it was never to help. It was always a scheduled photo opportunity. She and Gerald dropped by unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon during month 2. I was wearing the same sweatpants I had on for 3 days. My hair was tied in a messy knot. The house smelled like sour milk and laundry detergent. Patricia walked through the front door wearing crisp linen slacks, her hair freshly blown out, trailing a cloud of expensive floral perfume. Gerald trailed behind her, his hands stuffed in his pockets, looking anywhere but at the babies. Patricia carried 2 shopping bags from a high-end children's boutique downtown. "Look what I brought for my angels!" she announced, her voice echoing too loudly in the hallway. She pulled out 2 matching outfits. They were stiff-laced dresses and scratchy collared shirts. They were the kind of clothes you put on a doll, not a premature infant fighting sensory processing issues. The price tags were still attached. "They are trying to rest Mom," I whispered, standing between her and the twin bassinet. "Nonsense. They need to see their grandmother." Patricia bypassed me, reaching into the bassinet. She scooped up Lily, disrupting the fragile sleep I had spent an hour securing. Lily instantly stiffened, letting out a sharp cry. "Oh, hush now," Patricia cooed. She was not trying to soothe my daughter. She was trying to maneuver the tiny baby into the stiff lace dress. She tugged at Lily's fragile arms, forcing them through the rigid sleeves. The lace scratched against Lily's sensitive skin, and the crying escalated into a full-blown scream. Leo woke up immediately, joining his sister in a chaotic chorus of distress. Patricia did not care. She held a screaming, uncomfortable Lily up to the window to catch the natural light. "Gerald, take the picture," she ordered. Gerald fumbled with his phone, snapping photo after photo, while Lily wailed, her face turning a deep shade of purple. Patricia smiled for the camera, playing the picture of a devoted, grieving grandmother. The second the phone clicked, indicating the photos were saved, Patricia's smile vanished. The illusion dropped. She looked at the crying infant in her hands with naked irritation. "Here," Patricia said, thrusting Lily toward me like a defective piece of merchandise. "She needs changing or feeding or something. My blouse is getting ruined." I snatched Lily from her, holding my daughter close to my chest, shushing her, trying to block out the overwhelming scent of Patricia's perfume. Liam walked into the room, took one look at the situation, and stepped between my mother and the bassinet where Leo was still crying. "I think this visit is over," Liam said. His voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that brokered no argument. Patricia sniffed, smoothing the front of her unblemished shirt. "Well, we just wanted to check on them. You 2 look terrible, by the way. You really should hire some help." They left as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind a trail of perfume and 2 hysterical infants. I spent the next hour calming the twins, stripping them out of the scratchy boutique clothes, and holding them against my skin until their breathing steadied. Sitting there in the dim light of the nursery, listening to the rhythmic hum of the white noise machine, a cold realization settled over me. Patricia and Gerald viewed these children as props. They were tools for sympathy, accessories for a social media feed, and liabilities to be managed from a distance. We had physical custody of the twins, but the hospital discharge papers were just a temporary arrangement. The state still had ultimate jurisdiction. If Patricia decided one day that playing the hero grandmother required more access, or if she realized there was some hidden benefit to claiming them, she could use her biological ties to make our lives an unrelenting nightmare. She had the resources, the public sympathy, and a documented history of prioritizing her image over everything else. I looked down at Lily, now sleeping peacefully, her tiny fingers curled around the fabric of my shirt. I felt the familiar weight of the yellow medical bracelet in my pocket, the one Patricia had carelessly discarded weeks ago. Love and sleepless nights were not enough to protect them. We needed a fortress. We needed the law. I turned to Liam, who was rocking Leo in the corner chair. "We need to finalize the adoption," I told him. "We need to cut their legal ties before she realizes what she threw away." I expected my parents to fight us on it, or at least show a shred of genuine grief. What I did not expect was the chilling speed with which they would erase their names from my children's lives. Let us discuss the legal reality of taking in relatives. Physical custody is just a polite handshake with the state. Without a finalized adoption, the system can pluck those children from your home based on a single phone call or a sudden change of heart from biological kin. Patricia had a documented history of changing her mind whenever the wind blew, or whenever her social circle dictated a new trend. I could not risk my children becoming her next passing phase. We filed the petition for permanent adoption by month 4. The process typically requires interviews, home studies, and mountains of paperwork. Because we were direct relatives, and the state was eager to keep the twins out of foster care, the judge expedited our case. We just needed my parents to officially sever any residual claims they might possess. In Tennessee, grandparents can sometimes petition for visitation or custody if the biological parent passes away. I wanted that door nailed shut. I prepared myself for a war. I spent days practicing my arguments. I assumed Patricia would weep in the courtroom, clutching a handkerchief, claiming we were tearing her family apart. I thought she would hire an expensive litigator just to make a point about her authority. She did not hire anyone. She did not even want to go to the courthouse. She requested we meet at a 24-hour notary public located in the back of a dilapidated strip mall next to a dry cleaner. She chose it because it was cheap, discreet, and fast. We arrived on a humid Tuesday morning. The air inside the small office smelled of stale cigarette smoke and overheated printer toner. Liam and I sat in cracked vinyl chairs, a thick manila folder resting on my lap. Patricia and Gerald walked in exactly on time. They did not look like grieving grandparents saying a final goodbye to the only living pieces of their deceased daughter. They looked like investors closing a rather tedious real estate transaction. Patricia wore a crisp beige trench coat and dark sunglasses which she did not take off indoors. Gerald wore his golf attire, checking his wristwatch before he even sat down. "Hello, Bella," Patricia said briskly. "Let us get this over with. I have a luncheon at noon." She did not ask to see the twins. We had left them at home with a trusted friend, anticipating a stressful environment. But Patricia did not even inquire about their absence. She sat across from the plexiglass divider of the notary desk and tapped her manicured fingernails against the laminate counter. The notary! An older woman with tired eyes slid the stack of legal documents across the counter. "These papers are binding," the notary explained in a monotone voice. "By signing, you are voluntarily terminating any right to physical custody, legal guardianship, and visitation. You are also waiving any claim to financial support from the adoptive parents, and conversely, you are legally shielded from any financial liability regarding the medical or living expenses of these minors." That last sentence hovered in the stale air, legally shielded from financial liability. Patricia zeroed in on those words. Her posture straightened. She reached into her designer purse, ignoring the high-quality fountain pen she always carried, and grabbed a cheap blue plastic ballpoint pen from the notary cup on the counter. She did not read the documents. She did not skim the paragraphs detailing the permanent severance of her bloodline. She just flipped directly to the signature lines. The sound filled the quiet room. It was a sharp, frantic scratching. She pressed the blue plastic pen so hard into the paper, I thought it would tear through the page. First signature, second signature. Initials on page 3, initials on page 4. She moved with a desperate, unnatural haste. There was no hesitation. Not a single tear slipped out from behind those dark sunglasses. When she finished, she shoved the paperwork toward Gerald. "Sign it, Jerry," she commanded. Gerald took the pen. He paused for a fraction of a second, his eyes lingering on Clara's name printed at the top of the decree. Then he looked at his wife, blinked, and scribbled his name next to hers. Just like that, it was done. The notary stamped the pages with a heavy thud, making it official. Leo and Lily were legally ours. The fortress I desperately wanted was built. Patricia stood up, smoothed her coat, and offered a tight professional smile. "Well, that is a weight off everyone's shoulders, is it not? Good luck, Bella. Call us if you need advice." They walked out of the strip mall and climbed into their car. I watched them pull away from the curb, merging into traffic without a single glance back at the building. I sat in the car with Liam holding the stamped documents against my chest. I took my first deep breath in 4 months. The tension that had lived in my jaw since the night Clara died finally dissolved. "We did it," I whispered, staring at the bold black ink of the state seal. "They are safe. She cannot touch them now." Liam did not celebrate. He sat behind the steering wheel, his hands resting lightly on the leather, staring through the windshield at the empty parking space my parents had just vacated. His jaw was tight. His analytical brain was already processing the data we had just witnessed. "You grew up with her, Bella," Liam said, his voice low and careful. "Think about how your mother operates." "What do you mean?" I asked, the relief slightly chilling at the edges. "She spent 3 weeks deciding which shade of white to paint her guest bathroom," Liam pointed out. "She consults 4 different friends before buying a new patio set because she is terrified of making a bad investment. She cares about optics more than oxygen." He turned to look at me, tapping his index finger against the steering wheel. People like Patricia do not hide in a strip mall to sign away their grandchildren in 3 minutes flat. They do not sprint through a legal severance unless they are running away from a ticking time bomb. I looked down at the paperwork. The clause the notary had read aloud echoed in my mind. Legally shielded from financial liability. "She was scared of the medical bills," I rationalized. "The twins were expensive. She knew we drained our savings. She just wanted to make sure the hospital could not come after her assets if we went bankrupt." "Maybe," Liam said. "But dodging a debt does not make someone smile like that. Did you see her posture when she signed? That was not just relief. That was victory." I wanted to dismiss him. I wanted to take my win and go home to my babies. But living with a forensic accountant changes how you view the world. Liam views human behavior the same way he views a ledger. If the numbers do not balance, there is a hidden account. Patricia's behavior did not balance. For the next few weeks, I tried to push Liam's theory out of my mind. We focused on the twins. Leo learned to roll over. Lily started tracking objects with her bright green eyes. The shadows of their rough start were fading, replaced by the chaotic joy of normal infancy. We adjusted to our new financial reality. We traded in both of our comfortable vehicles for a single reliable used sedan. We clipped coupons, canceled streaming services, and learned to cook every meal at home. We were broke, but our house was full of laughter and warmth. We had everything we needed. My parents maintained their distance exactly as the legal documents dictated. They did not call. They did not ask for photos. They seemed perfectly content to pretend Clara's children no longer existed. Then, right around the twins' 6-month mark, the silence broke. It started with a phone call from Aunt Susan, my father's sister. She called on a Sunday evening, her voice brimming with cheerful curiosity. "I just saw the photos online," Susan chattered. "I had no idea Gerald and Patricia were planning such a big purchase. Good for them. After everything with Clara, they deserve a distraction." I held the phone to my ear, confused. "What purchase?" "Oh, you haven't seen it," Susan asked. "The motorhome. They just bought a top-of-the-line model." It is beautiful. I ended the call and opened my laptop. I pulled up my mother's social media page. Sure enough, posted just an hour ago was a pristine photograph of Patricia and Gerald standing in a dealership lot. Behind them sat a gleaming 40-foot luxury recreational vehicle. The caption read, "New beginnings. Time to travel and heal." I stared at the screen, the blood rushing in my ears. I knew the brand of that recreational vehicle. It retailed for roughly $80,000. This was the same woman who 4 months prior claimed she could not afford to buy a single box of specialty diapers. This was the same woman who sprinted into a cheap strip mall to sign away her grandchildren to avoid medical liability. Liam walked into the kitchen wiping his hands on a dish towel. He saw my face, then looked at the laptop screen. He leaned over my shoulder, his eyes scanning the photograph, noting the make, the model, the dealership logo in the background. I looked up at my husband. The unease from the notary office came rushing back, crashing into this impossible display of wealth. "The math does not work," Liam said softly, his forensic instincts waking up. He pulled out a chair and sat down next to me, the glow of the screen reflected in his eyes. "People who are afraid of medical debt do not drop 80 grand on a weekend toy." He was right. They were not running away from a liability. They had cleared their ledgers so they could focus on a hidden asset. And Liam was going to find out exactly where that money came from. By month 6, the twins were thriving. The hollowed-out exhaustion of those early weeks began to lift, replaced by the chaotic joy of normal infancy. Leo learned to roll over on the living room rug. Lily started tracking objects, her bright green eyes following my hand whenever I brought a bottle near. They were gaining weight. They were smiling. The shadows of their rough start were fading. Our bank accounts, however, were bleeding dry. Liam and I made the necessary sacrifices. We took our comfortable SUVs to a dealership on the outskirts of Nashville and traded them in. We drove away in a single reliable used sedan. It had a stain on the back seat and a rattle in the dashboard, but it eliminated 2 car payments. We clipped coupons. We canceled every streaming service. We learned to cook cheap meals at home. We were broke, but our house was full of warmth. I would trade every dollar I owned to hear Leo laugh. My parents maintained a quiet distance for weeks after the notary office. Then a loud diesel engine interrupted our quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch bouncing Lily on my knee when the windows vibrated. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. A pristine 40-foot recreational vehicle was idling in my driveway. Its polished fiberglass exterior gleamed in the Tennessee sun. The sheer size of the machine dwarfed our modest front yard. I opened the door holding Lily against my hip. Patricia stepped out of the passenger side. She wore designer sunglasses and a silk scarf tied around her neck. Gerald followed, patting the side of the vehicle like it was a prized racehorse. "Surprise!" Patricia called out, waving her hand toward the towering metal structure. "We decided to take it for a spin. You simply must see the interior, Bella. It has quartz countertops and a king-sized bed." I stood on the porch, the humid air pressing against my skin. I did not step down the stairs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking application. The screen loaded, displaying a checking account balance of $412. We had mortgage payments, utility bills, and pediatric follow-up appointments looming. I looked from my phone to the $80,000 luxury toy parked on my concrete driveway. "How did you afford this, Mom?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively, the gold bracelets on her wrist clinking together. "Oh, you know your father. Smart investments. We decided it was time to prioritize our healing. We deserve a little joy after losing Clara. She used my sister's death as a coupon code for sympathy, a justification for a luxury purchase. She did not ask how the twins were doing. She did not glance at Lily, who was staring wide-eyed at the noisy engine. "Well, we cannot stay," Patricia announced cheerfully. "We have a reservation at a luxury campground near the Smoky Mountains. Just wanted to show you our new beginning." They climbed back into the leather seats. The air brakes hissed. The heavy vehicle backed out of our driveway, leaving a faint cloud of diesel exhaust hanging in the air. I stood there holding a baby I was struggling to feed, watching my mother drive away in a rolling mansion. When Liam returned from work that evening, he parked our used sedan in the spot the RV had vacated. I told him about the visit. I described the quartz countertops, the air brakes, the dismissive wave of my mother's hand. Liam did not say a word. He kissed my forehead, kissed the twins, and walked straight into his home office. He closed the door. "My husband is a forensic accountant. He spends his professional life dismantling financial illusions. He hunts hidden offshore accounts, uncovers corporate embezzlement, and maps the flow of dirty money. He operates on a fundamental principle: money always leaves a footprint." I put the twins to bed and brought Liam a cup of coffee. His office was dark, illuminated only by the harsh blue glow of his dual monitors. His screen was fractured into a dozen different windows: county clerk records, property tax assessments, business registries. I sat in the chair across from his desk. "Did you find something?" Liam rubbed the bridge of his nose, his eyes fixed on a digitized ledger. "Your parents did not make smart investments, Bella. They made catastrophic ones." He turned one of the monitors toward me. It displayed a labyrinth of highlighted documents and red text. 2 years ago, Patricia cashed out a substantial life insurance policy. She took every dime of it and sank it into a speculative commercial real estate venture in East Nashville, a luxury strip mall project. I stared at the screen. My mother had never mentioned real estate. "The project went bankrupt 9 months ago." Liam explained, his voice low and analytical. "The developers vanished. Patricia lost the entire investment. But she did not stop there. To cover the losses and maintain their country club lifestyle, Gerald took out a second mortgage on their house. Their credit cards are maxed to the limit." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "They are broke." "They are drowning," Liam corrected. "They are suffocating in debt. They do not have the liquid cash to buy a tank of gas for that vehicle, let alone purchase it outright." "So,
"Then how is it sitting in my driveway?" "That is the anomaly,"
Liam said. He pulled up another document.
"It was a lien registry for the recreational vehicle. I ran the vehicle identification number through the state database. The RV is not financed through a traditional bank loan. It was purchased through a specialty lender that requires immense collateral or guaranteed impending payout, a bridge loan." "A bridge loan means you are expecting a large sum of cash in the near future. It means Patricia and Gerald promised the lender that a significant influx of money was arriving soon. Where would they get a guaranteed payout?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam closed the property records. He opened a new blank search window. "That is the question keeping me awake. They do not have rich relatives. They do not have high-paying jobs. The only significant event in their lives recently was Clara's passing." He typed the name of the facility where my sister spent her final weeks, Sunrise Meadows Rehabilitation Center. Clara was a struggling addict. She did not have wealth. Yet she spent her final 3 months in a facility that charges upwards of $30,000 a month. We always assumed Patricia and Gerald drained their savings to pay for it. But if they were drowning in real estate debt, they could not afford Sunrise Meadows either. "Someone else was paying the bills," Liam murmured, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Or someone owes them money because of what happened there. Sunrise Meadows has a history." He pulled up a news article from a local business journal. It detailed a series of severe health code violations at the facility, citations for understaffing, allegations of medical negligence. Liam stopped typing. He looked at me, the blue light casting long shadows across his face. To find out what happened in that facility, I need to know who Clara was talking to during her final weeks. I need her communications. I swallowed hard, the implications hovering in the silent room. Her belongings are in the attic. We boxed them up after the funeral. Liam stood up from his desk. I need her laptop, Bella. The money trail ends at her death. The answers start there. The path to Clara's past required stepping into the stifling heat of our attic. I pulled the cord in the hallway ceiling, guiding the wooden folding stairs down to the carpet. The air above was thick, smelling of cedar planks and trapped summer heat. I navigated through cardboard boxes of holiday decorations until I found the plastic storage bin labeled with my sister's name. We had packed her apartment away the week after the funeral. I lifted the lid. Her favorite denim jacket lay folded neatly on top, smelling faintly of the vanilla perfume she used to wear before the addiction hollowed her out. Beneath a stack of old paperback novels sat her laptop. It was a sleek silver piece of metal, heavy and cold to the touch. I picked it up, feeling like I was holding a digital tomb, and carried it downstairs to Liam. My husband was waiting in his home office. It was 2:00 in the morning. The house was silent save for the rhythmic, synchronized breathing of the twins coming through the baby monitor on the desk. Liam cleared a space next to his dual monitors and plugged the laptop into the wall charger. We waited in the dark. The screen flickered to life, casting a harsh, pale white glare across the room. The login screen appeared, demanding a password. Clara and I had shared a childhood dog named Buster, followed by the year we moved to Nashville. I typed the sequence into the prompt. The desktop opened immediately. Liam took control of the mouse. He worked with the clinical, detached precision of a man hunting for a specific target. He ignored the photo albums, the saved music playlists, and the generic document folders. He opened the system terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard, typing commands that bypassed the standard user interface. He was looking for partitioned drives, encrypted files, anything deliberately obscured from plain sight. He understands that people who are afraid leave digital footprints in the shadows. After 10 minutes of steady typing, a hidden directory surfaced on the screen. The folder bore a title that made my chest tighten. "If I do not make it." Liam clicked the icon. The folder did not contain the bank statements or financial ledgers we expected to find. It contained 7 video files. The creation dates listed next to the files mapped back perfectly to Clara's final month at Sunrise Meadows Rehabilitation Center. I pulled my chair closer to Liam. The air circulating from the vent above us suddenly felt freezing against my skin. Liam hovered the cursor over the first file, glanced at me to ensure I was ready, and pressed play. The media player launched. Clara filled the screen. Seeing her face in motion hit me like a physical blow. This was not the glossy, carefully filtered image Patricia used for her social media performances. This was the unvarnished, brutal reality of her decline. Clara sat on a narrow institutional bed wearing a faded, oversized hospital gown. Her collarbones protruded sharply against her pale skin. Her dark hair was thin, falling in stringy, unwashed patches around her face. She looked terrified. She reached out, adjusting the webcam, her hands trembling so hard the image shook. Her voice crackled through the small laptop speakers. It was a harsh, raspy whisper. "It is Tuesday," she said, her eyes darting nervously toward the closed door behind her. "Mom and Dad came to visit today. They did not bring any clothes. They did not ask how the group therapy is going. They brought a man with them. He wore a gray suit and carried a leather briefcase." Clara paused, swallowing hard, her throat working against an invisible knot. They timed it. They waited until right after the nurse gave me my afternoon medication. When my head started swimming and the room went blurry, Mom put a legal pad on my lap. She pressed a pen into my fingers. She told me if I did not sign the papers, they would stop paying for this bed and put me out on the street. Liam paused the video. The silence in the office was deafening, heavy with the weight of a betrayal I was only just beginning to comprehend. We watched the next file and then the next. A horrifying pattern emerged across the digital diary. Patricia and Gerald were not visiting their daughter to support her fragile recovery. They were treating her room like a hostile boardroom. Clara recounted how her parents paced the floor, examining the peeling wallpaper, documenting the understaffed nursing station, and taking photographs of the unsanitary bathrooms. "They are watching me," Clara whispered in the final video, recorded just 2 days before her fatal overdose. Tears tracked a slow path through the dust on her hollow cheeks. "They do not want me to get better, Bella. They are angry about the money they spent on me. They are trying to find a way to get it back. The lawyer asks so many questions about my doctors. They are building something. They are trapping me." The video ended. Fading into a stark black screen. The haunting, flickering light of the laptop reflected in the dark window pane behind the desk. I sat frozen in my chair, hot tears spilling down my face. My sister died in that facility, believing her own parents were preying on her. The worst part of that realization was knowing she was absolutely right. The narrative of my parents being negligent. Detached grandparents shattered entirely. They were not neglectful. They were active, calculating predators. Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, his analytical mind locking the data points together. Sunrise Meadows was notorious for medical malpractice. Liam stated, his voice hard and flat. Your parents knew the facility was dangerous. They documented the negligence while Clara was still breathing. They were preparing a wrongful death or personal injury lawsuit before she even passed away. The puzzle pieces snapped together with sickening clarity. Patricia and Gerald had lost their life savings in that failed real estate venture. They were drowning in debt, desperate for a lifeline. They looked at their struggling, addicted daughter and saw a potential settlement to exploit. The $80,000 recreational vehicle idling in my driveway yesterday was purchased with a bridge loan. That loan was secured by the promise of an impending massive payout from the clinic. But a glaring legal complication remained. Clara passed away without drafting a will. Any settlement money resulting from a wrongful death lawsuit would legally bypass my parents. The state mandates those funds go directly into a trust for the deceased's next of kin. Her next of kin were the twins sleeping peacefully down the hall. Patricia and Gerald could not touch a single dime of that money unless they controlled the children. I looked at Liam, panic rising sharp in my throat. If the money belongs to Leo and Lily, I said, my voice shaking. Why did Mom and Dad sign the adoption papers so quickly? Why did they willingly give up their rights in that strip mall? Liam turned to me, his expression grim. They signed away their rights because they needed to dodge the immediate crushing hospital debts. They needed us to absorb the financial hit of the neonatal intensive care unit and the specialized formula. They let us do the heavy lifting. But now that the wrongful death settlement is finalizing, they need those rights back. To reverse a finalized adoption or challenge legal guardianship, my parents would need to prove to a family court judge that Liam and I are unfit. They would need a documented, undeniable paper trail demonstrating that the twins are in immediate danger under our roof. They would need the state to intervene. The safety of the legal wall I thought we built crumbled into dust. We were not safe.
We were standing right in the center of their crosshairs. The quiet sanctuary of our home suddenly felt breached. My parents had sacrificed their own daughter for a payout, and now they were circling my children. 2 weeks later, that encroaching threat manifested on my front porch. I was standing in the kitchen on a bright Tuesday afternoon, mixing a bottle of formula for Leo, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the front door. A woman holding a thick clipboard stood on the welcome mat. She wore a lanyard around her neck displaying a state identification badge from the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. The woman standing on my welcome mat introduced herself as Sarah. The laminated identification badge hanging from her neck caught the afternoon sun displaying the official seal of the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. She held a thick black clipboard pressed against her chest. I stood in the doorway with a freshly mixed bottle of warm formula in my hand. The air evaporated from my lungs. "We received an anonymous tip regarding the welfare of 2 infants residing at this address," Sarah stated. Her tone was professional but detached. She recited the allegations from her paperwork. Unsafe environment, malnutrition, neglect. Those words felt like physical strikes to my jaw. I stepped back, pulling the heavy oak door open to let her inside. My hands shook so hard the milk in the plastic bottle sloshed against the rim. I led her straight into the living room. Leo and Lily were doing tummy time on their foam playmat. Lily babbled happily, reaching for a brightly colored fabric block. Leo kicked his legs, his head lifted strong and steady. "I am a pediatric physical therapist. I have dedicated my entire professional life to the healthy development of children. Having a state official stand in my living room to assess if I was starving my own babies was a humiliation so profound it made my ears ring." Sarah walked through our home, her pen scratching notes onto standardized forms. I guided her down the hallway to the nursery. I showed her the meticulously organized changing station. I opened the pantry doors to reveal rows of specialized, expensive hypoallergenic formula we had sacrificed our savings to stockpile. I produced the thick medical binder Liam maintained. I showed her the growth charts, the immunization records, and the glowing progress notes from their neonatal specialists. Every time she checked a box on her form, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. This was the system my mother had weaponized. The state does not operate on nuance. They operate on rigid protocols. If they found a single hazard, a single misstep, they had the authority to pull my children from their cribs. I watched Sarah inspect the latches on our baby gates. I watched her check the temperature of our refrigerator. The invasion of privacy was suffocating. I stood silently near the doorway, holding my breath, praying she would see the truth. After 45 tense minutes, Sarah lowered her clipboard. The rigid posture she brought into my home softened. She looked at Leo, who had just managed to roll onto his back and was clapping his tiny hands. She smiled. It was a genuine warm smile. The tension in the room fractured. She apologized for the intrusion. She explained that the department is legally required to investigate every claim, but it was abundantly clear these babies were thriving in a loving home. She closed the metal clasp on her clipboard. The case would be marked unfounded and closed immediately. I walked her to the front door. I thanked her, maintaining a polite and composed facade. The moment her sedan pulled out of my driveway, I locked the deadbolt. I slid down the solid wood of the front door until I hit the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest and sobbed. It was not a quiet or graceful cry. It was a ragged release of pure terror. Someone had tried to take my babies. Someone had tried to fracture the family we had sacrificed our own comfort to build. Liam came home 2 hours later. He found me sitting at the kitchen island, staring blankly at the wall, the business card from the caseworker resting on the granite counter. I recounted the visit. I told him about the severe allegations. The invasive inspection, the paralyzing fear. Most husbands would have paced the floor. Most would have shouted. Liam did neither. He picked up the business card, his face hardening into a mask of pure, calculated focus. You do not just accept an anonymous claim and move on. Not when you are a forensic accountant trained to trace anomalies. Liam made a phone call to a contact he utilized for background checks in his corporate fraud investigations. He requested a copy of the intake report. Because the case was already flagged as unfounded and closed, his contact managed to pull the redacted transcript of the anonymous call by the following morning. We sat at the kitchen table while the twins napped. Liam slid a printed sheet of paper across the wood surface. The caller identification was blocked and the voice was disguised. Liam explained, tapping the paper with his index finger. But the language is a fingerprint. Read the specific phrases the caller used to describe our household. I scanned the black text. The anonymous caller did not just say we were bad parents. They provided a fabricated narrative. The transcript read that we were financially unstable. The caller claimed we were living above our means and could not afford proper nutrition for the children. I stopped breathing. Financially unstable. Living above our means. Those were not generic complaints. Those were Patricia's exact catchphrases. It was the precise vocabulary she used to judge her neighbors, her church friends, and me. She called them. My own mother picked up a telephone and tried to trigger a state removal of her grandchildren. The reality of the video diaries Clara left behind crashed into the present moment. Patricia was not just watching us. She was actively setting the stage. She knew a family court judge would never reverse a finalized adoption without cause. She was testing the waters, trying to manufacture a documented history of our unfitness. If the caseworker had found even a single empty formula bottle or a messy nursery, Patricia would have used that official state record as ammunition for her impending custody lawsuit. Hot, blinding fury replaced my fear. I pushed my chair back from the table. The wooden leg scraped loudly against the tile. I grabbed my car keys from the counter. I am going to her house, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt before. I'm going to stand on her immaculate porch and scream until the entire neighborhood knows exactly what kind of monster lives inside. Liam stood up and intercepted me before I reached the door. He placed his hands firmly on my shoulders, grounding me. His dark eyes were intense, lacking any trace of panic. He was already 3 steps ahead of my anger. Do not go over there, Bella. He instructed, his tone steady and commanding. Think about what she wants. She wants you to be erratic. She wants you to show up unhinged, yelling on her lawn so she can call the police and add a harassment report to her fabricated custody case. She is trying to provoke a reaction. He took the keys from my trembling fingers. If you confront her now, you show her our cards. You let her know we are on to her strategy. She will just change her tactics and strike from a different angle. We are dealing with a predator who is backed into a financial corner. Predators are most dangerous when they know they are being hunted. What do we do? I asked, the fight drained out of me, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. We let her think she won, Liam said quietly, looking toward the hallway where our children were sleeping. We let her think the visit terrified us. We play the part of the exhausted, broke, frightened young parents. We let her build her trap because while she is busy laying the bait, I am going to find the lawyer she hired to pull the trigger, and then we are going to dismantle them both. For the next 3 weeks, I wore fear like a second skin. I made sure my mother saw it. When Patricia called on a Sunday evening to casually ask how we were adjusting, I let my voice waver. I told her I was exhausted. I mentioned the unexpected knock from the state investigator, injecting just enough panic into my tone to make the performance believable.
On the other end of the line, Patricia offered a smooth, sympathetic hum. She told me the system was just doing its job, suggesting lightly that we must have left the blinds open while the house was in disarray. She was fishing for weakness. I fed her exactly what she wanted. I stayed off social media entirely. I parked our used sedan inside the garage so the driveway looked vacant. We presented the perfect illusion of a young couple buckling under mounting pressure. While I maintained the facade of the terrified mother, Liam transformed our guest bedroom into a war room. My husband does not yell or throw objects when he feels threatened. He gathers data. He purchased a large rolling whiteboard from an office supply store and dragged it up the stairs. For nights on end, he sat bathed in the stark glow of his dual monitors, drinking lukewarm coffee, cross-referencing court dockets, corporate shell companies, and medical malpractice filings across the state of Tennessee. He was hunting the money that bought that luxury recreational vehicle. He was tracing the dark shadow my sister left behind at the rehabilitation center. It was a Thursday night when the final piece clicked into place. The twins were asleep in their cribs. I was folding laundry in the living room when Liam walked down the stairs. His face was pale, his jaw set in a rigid line. He did not say a word. He just took my hand, his fingers cold against mine, and led me up to the guest room. The whiteboard was covered in black marker. It looked like a chaotic web of arrows and legal jargon. But as I stepped closer, the architecture of my parents' greed became horrifyingly clear. In the top left corner, Liam had written Clara's name. Below it, he drew a thick line connecting her to Sunrise Meadows Rehabilitation Center. The facility did not just have a few minor health code violations, Liam explained, his voice low and raspy from lack of sleep. They had a lethal pattern of gross medical negligence. I managed to pull unsealed tax filings and corporate damage control reports. 2 months ago, the clinic quietly settled a wrongful death civil suit regarding 3 patients. Those patients suffered fatal overdoses due to unsupervised pharmaceutical access on the ward. Clara was one of those 3 patients. I stared at the numbers written in bold ink at the center of the board. The clinic payout for Clara's passing was $2.8 million. The digits seemed to blur together before my eyes. My sister's tragic decline, her fear, her final breaths were all quantified into a corporate settlement meant to keep a scandal out of the local news. But Clara passed away without a drafted will. In this state, a wrongful death settlement for an unmarried individual with children bypasses the parents. The funds are legally mandated to drop into a protected trust for the next of kin, the orphans. I traced the black marker lines with my eyes. The arrows pointed from the trust account, funneling down toward a specific date circled in red marker, the twins' first birthday. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the red circle. Liam stepped up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "The trust is locked," he explained, his tone hollow. "The insurance company cannot release the initial payout until the legal guardians sign the authorization forms. Those forms activate the trust upon the beneficiary's first birthday." The reality of his words slammed into me. Patricia and Gerald knew about the impending settlement. They were the ones who initiated the legal inquiry while Clara was still breathing, just like she warned in her digital video diaries. But they hit a brick wall when Clara died. The money belonged to Leo and Lily. My parents needed us to adopt the twins quickly to dodge the immediate crushing neonatal intensive care costs. They let Liam and me absorb the financial ruin of the first grueling year. We paid for the specialized formula. We paid the pediatrician copays. We stayed awake for the tremors. Now, with the birthday approaching and the settlement finalized, they needed custody back to seize the prize. Liam tapped the bottom right corner of the whiteboard. He had drawn a line directly from the frozen trust account to the $80,000 recreational vehicle. They secured a high-interest bridge loan to buy that motorhome, Liam stated, tapping the board for emphasis. They used the impending $2.8 million as collateral. They promised the specialty lender they would have control of the funds by early May. If they do not seize custody of Leo and Lily before that birthday, they default. They lose the vehicle, they lose their mortgaged house, they lose the country club memberships, they lose everything. The air in the guest room felt too thin to breathe. I sank onto the edge of the mattress. I looked back at the board, feeling the very last threads of my childhood illusion burn away into ash. My parents did not care about the twins. They did not want to raise them. They did not care to hear Leo speak his first word or see Lily take her first step. These two beautiful, resilient infants were nothing but a multi-million-dollar payday. They were the keys to unlocking a vault that would erase my parents' catastrophic real estate debts. The anonymous state investigator visit was not just cruel harassment. It was a calculated business strategy. Patricia needed documented proof of our unfitness to present to a family court judge. She needed an emergency removal order. She dressed them in scratchy boutique clothes for photos to build a digital history of her loving involvement, while simultaneously plotting to rip them from the only safe home they had ever known. I felt a sickening chill wash over my skin. If my mother and father were willing to leverage a state agency to steal infants, they were capable of far worse. They had to have sophisticated legal help. Patricia and Gerald were cunning, but they did not possess the specific legal knowledge to navigate a multi-million-dollar trust bypass on their own. They needed an architect for this extortion. They needed a lawyer dirty enough to file fraudulent claims and orchestrate anonymous child welfare reports. Liam picked up a felt eraser and wiped a small section of the board clean. He uncapped his black marker again. He wrote a single name on the pristine white surface. Silas Vane. He is the litigator who handled the Sunrise Meadows settlement. Liam said, his eyes narrowing at the name. He is the one pulling the strings for your mother. He is building the legal trap. What do we do? I asked, my voice devoid of fear replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. We do not wait for the trap to snap shut, Liam replied. Tomorrow morning I am going to call Mr. Vane. I'm going to invite him right into our home. The following morning, Liam did not put on his usual work attire. He called his firm, requested a personal day, and drove to a specialized electronics retailer downtown. Most people targeted by a predatory legal scheme would wait for the inevitable knock on the door. They would hire a defensive family law attorney, brace for a long court battle, and hope a judge saw through the lies. Liam does not play defense. My husband tracks financial fraud. He knows that when you are dealing with individuals who operate in the shadows, you do not drag them into the light. You invite them into a room where they feel invisible, and you let them hang themselves. While Liam was out securing our countermeasures, I researched the man who was trying to steal my children. Silas Vane was not a back-alley lawyer. He was a high-end, polished litigator with an office in a glass tower overlooking the Nashville skyline. He bought billboard space on Interstate 65, featuring his pristine smile and tailored suits. He specialized in quiet, lucrative corporate settlements. He was the kind of attorney who made scandals disappear for hospitals and rehabilitation centers in exchange for exorbitant contingency fees. He did not care about justice. He cared about leverage. Liam returned home carrying 2 nondescript shopping bags. Inside were 3 high-definition motion-activated cameras with integrated audio recording capabilities. They did not look like surveillance equipment. One was built into a functional phone charger. Another was disguised as a standard smoke detector. The third and most important one was housed inside a modern digital clock. We spent the afternoon staging the home office.
Liam placed the digital clock on the wooden bookshelf directly across from the guest chairs. He adjusted the angle with meticulous care, ensuring the lens captured the entire seating area. I watched the subtle, almost imperceptible red light blink once as the device synced to the secure server Liam established on his encrypted laptop. We were turning our sanctuary into a trap. The strategy required us to swallow our pride. We had to present ourselves as the desperate, broken couple my mother wanted us to be. I spent the weekend cultivating the appearance of defeat. I stopped wearing makeup. I threw my hair into a messy, unwashed knot. I wore an oversized, stained sweatshirt. Liam skipped shaving for 3 days, letting dark stubble cast a tired shadow across his jaw. We needed Silas Vane to look at us and see easy prey. On Monday morning, Liam made the phone call. He dialed the direct line to the law office of Silas Vane. I stood next to him, listening to the conversation through the speakerphone. When Silas answered, his tone was smooth, professional, and dripping with manufactured courtesy. Liam played his part beautifully. He lowered his voice, letting a tremor of exhaustion bleed into his words. He told the attorney that we knew about the $2.8 million settlement regarding Clara. He confessed that we were drowning in debt, that the twins were ruining our marriage, and that the recent visit from the state child welfare investigator was the final straw. "We know Patricia wants them," Liam said, rubbing his eyes even though the lawyer could not see him. "We know she is coming for custody. We cannot afford to fight you in court. We just want a way out." The silence on the other end of the line was thick with calculation. Silas was processing the unexpected surrender. A contested custody battle would cost him months of billable hours and delay his payout. A quiet, voluntary relinquishment was his dream scenario. He agreed to meet us at our house the following evening, insisting on a discreet, off-the-record consultation. Tuesday arrived with heavy rain clouds rolling over the Tennessee hills. At precisely 6, a sleek black Lexus pulled into our driveway, parking right where my parents' luxury recreational vehicle had idled weeks before. Silas Vane stepped out into the drizzle. He wore a charcoal gray suit that cost more than our monthly mortgage. He carried a slim leather briefcase and walked with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed he owned the ground he stepped on. I opened the front door holding a fussy lily on my hip. I did not greet him with a smile. I looked away, playing the part of the ashamed, defeated mother. Silas stepped over the threshold, his expensive leather shoes clicking against our hardwood floors. He took a brief, assessing look around our modest living room. I saw his upper lip curl just a fraction of an inch. He smelled of rain-expensive cologne and arrogance. Liam emerged from the kitchen, offering a tense, tired handshake. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Vane. Let us talk in the office." I handed Lily over to our trusted neighbor, who had agreed to watch the twins in the nursery, and followed the men down the hall. We took our seats behind the wooden desk. Silas sat across from us, crossing one leg over the other, resting his briefcase on his lap. He looked perfectly comfortable. He was situated directly in the center of the frame, facing the bookshelf. The tiny red light on the digital clock pulsed silently, recording every breath he took. "I understand you are feeling overwhelmed, Mr. and Mrs. Adams," Silas began, his voice a practiced purr of fake empathy. "Raising infants is a severe financial burden. Your mother is very concerned about your current living conditions. She is prepared to file an emergency custody petition by the end of the week." Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. He slid a piece of paper across the wood surface. It was a fabricated financial draft Liam had spent hours creating. It detailed crushing credit card debt, overdue utility notices, and a fictional second mortgage. It painted a picture of inevitable bankruptcy. "We cannot fight a petition," Liam said, keeping his eyes fixed on the desk.
If she drags us into family court, we lose the house. We lose everything. You know we are broke, but we also know she cannot access that trust without our signatures." Silas glanced at the fake financial draft. He did not bother to hide his amusement. He saw a man surrendering his family for financial survival. "And what exactly are you proposing, Liam?" "We will sign the voluntary relinquishment forms," Liam replied, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "We will hand full custody over to Patricia and Gerald before the twins turn 1. We will not contest the transfer. We will walk away quietly, but we will not do it for free." Silas raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. He steepled his fingers, staring at us with predatory interest. "We want a $100,000 parting gift," Liam demanded. "You arrange a private, untraceable payout from my parents' side. You get your uncontested custody transfer. They get access to the trust, and we get enough cash to clear our debts and start over." The air in the office went still. I held my breath, digging my fingernails into my palms under the desk. We had just offered to sell my sister's children. It was the most vile, repulsive proposition I could imagine. But it was exactly the kind of transaction Silas Vane understood. A slow, chilling smirk spread across the lawyer's face. His eyes lit up with unvarnished greed. He did not look disgusted by our offer. He looked triumphant. We had just validated his entire worldview. He believed everyone had a price. And he believed he had just negotiated a multi-million-dollar payday for a fraction of the cost. He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, resting his expensive suit jacket against our cheap wooden desk. He thought he was playing us. He thought he had outsmarted the broke, exhausted couple from the suburbs. $100,000 is a steep request for 2 people facing an impending child endangerment investigation, Silas countered smoothly. "Especially considering the state already has a record of your unsavory home environment. You and I both know that child welfare report was a tactical fabrication." Liam shot back, injecting just enough frustration into his tone to sound genuine. Silas chuckled. It was a dry, hollow sound. He felt invincible in our dim little office. He felt so superior, so untouchable that he dropped his professional filter entirely. He opened his leather briefcase, pulled out a gold pen, and prepared to rewrite the rules of our surrender. He was getting comfortable. He was getting ready to boast. And as he smiled at us, entirely blind to the digital clock blinking on the shelf behind him, the architect of my family's destruction prepared to confess to everything. Silas Vane did not blink at our demand. Instead, a slow, chilling chuckle rumbled from his chest. The sound was dry and hollow, echoing off the walls of our small home office. He reached forward, picked up the ceramic mug of coffee I had poured for him earlier, and took a deliberate sip. The ceramic clinked softly against the wooden desk when he set it back down. That singular, self-satisfied noise grated against my nerves. He was sitting in my house drinking my coffee, preparing to explain exactly how he planned to ruin my family. "You want a buyout?" Silas said, his voice dripping with condescension. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. "You want $100,000 to walk away from a sinking ship." "I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit, Mr. Adams. Truly I do. But you are operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of your current leverage. You do not have any." Liam narrowed his eyes, playing the part of the cornered defensive husband. "We have the kids," Liam countered, keeping his tone tight and frustrated. "We are their legal adoptive parents. Patricia cannot touch the trust without our consent, and a judge is not going to reverse an adoption just because we have some credit card debt. You need us to sign those relinquishment forms." Silas shook his head, offering a pitying smile. "You are looking at the board, but you are not seeing the pieces."
He unclasped his briefcase, the brass lock snapping open with a sharp click. He did not pull out any documents. He just rested his hand on the leather lid, enjoying the suspense he thought he was building.
Your mother-in-law is a very determined woman.
Silas began, his tone shifting into a polished lecturing cadence.
When she realized the wrongful death settlement required the signatures of the legal guardians to release the funds,
she encountered a roadblock. You two were not playing along with her narrative, so she removed the roadblock. What are you talking about? I asked, letting my voice waver perfectly.
Patricia already signed the preliminary guardian authorization forms,
Silas stated smoothly. He watched our faces, waiting for the shock to register. She forged your signature, Bella. She forged Liam's signature as well.
She submitted the documents to the insurance adjusters last week. The paperwork is already processing.
My stomach plummeted, but not from fear. The nausea stemmed from the sheer audacity of the crime. My mother had committed identity theft and federal wire fraud to bypass a trust meant for orphans. And this high-profile litigator was sitting in my office openly acknowledging it.
You submitted forged documents to an insurance conglomerate,
Liam asked, ensuring his voice carried clearly toward the digital clock on the bookshelf.
You know that is a federal offense.
Silas waved his hand, dismissing the accusation like a minor inconvenience.
I did not forge anything. My client provided the documents. I simply filed them.
Plausible deniability is the cornerstone of a successful practice. By the time the company finalizes the payout, Patricia will have emergency custody of the twins. The signatures will become a moot point because she will be their actual legal guardian. The funds will drop directly into an account she controls.
And how exactly does she get emergency custody?
Liam pressed, guiding the attorney right into the jaws of the trap.
You think one anonymous child welfare call is going to convince a judge to rip 2 infants out of a stable home?
Silas laughed again. It was the sound of a predator playing with its food. 1 call is an anomaly. 2 calls establish a pattern, but an ongoing documented investigation orchestrated by a concerned grandmother creates a crisis. I orchestrated that first investigator visit to establish a baseline file. I told Patricia exactly what phrases to use to trigger an immediate home inspection.
Living above your means.
Financially unstable. It worked beautifully. The state opened a file. He leaned forward, dropping his voice into a conspiratorial register.
Next week, another call will be placed.
This one will allege physical neglect. The state will be forced to escalate. They will remove the children pending a full investigation. Patricia will step in as the loving biological grandmother, offering a safe, wealthy harbor. The judge will grant her temporary custody, which we will swiftly convert to permanent. You orchestrated a fake child endangerment report, I repeated, staring at his smug face. You used the state to terrorize us.
I used the tools available to me,
Silas corrected.
Law is not about truth. It is about narrative.
My narrative is cleaner than yours. You are broke, exhausted, and under investigation. Patricia is affluent, stable, and eager to heal her family. Who do you think the judge will favor? Liam let a heavy silence stretch across the room. He looked down at his hands, playing the defeated man to perfection.
Why are you doing this?
Liam asked quietly. Patricia and Gerald are drowning in real estate debt. They cannot afford your retainer. High-end litigators do not work pro bono for desperate grandparents. Silas smiled, his teeth showing white against the dim light of the office. He could not resist the urge to brag. Arrogance is a fatal flaw, and Silas possessed it in abundance. He wanted us to know exactly how smart he was.
I do not work on a retainer for this caliber of litigation,
Silas explained, his chest puffing out slightly.
We agreed to a contingency structure. Once the $2.8 million drops into Patricia's control, my firm takes a 40% cut. Over $1 million for a few months of maneuvering. It is a highly lucrative arrangement. The math settled into the quiet room. A 40% cut of an orphan settlement. Silas was not just an architect, he was a partner in the extortion. He had manufactured a crisis-initiated federal fraud and weaponized a state agency, all to pocket over $1 million of Clara's death settlement. So, Silas continued, snapping his briefcase shut, the brass locks echoing sharply, the $100,000 buyout you requested is off the table. You are not getting a dime. Here is what is going to happen instead. He stood up, smoothing the front of his expensive jacket. The twins turn 1-year-old next Saturday. I know you are planning a backyard birthday party. I saw the invitations Patricia printed. It is a fitting milestone. You are going to sign the voluntary relinquishment forms I will draft tomorrow. You will hand those children over to Patricia at that party quietly and without a fuss.
And if we refuse?
Liam asked, looking up at the lawyer.
If you refuse,
Silas said, his tone turning to ice,
I will make sure the next child welfare call includes allegations of substance abuse. I will have the police at your door during the birthday party. They will carry those babies out in front of your neighbors, your friends, and your coworkers. You will leave in handcuffs. You will spend tens of thousands of dollars fighting criminal charges, and you will still lose custody.
He picked up his coffee mug, took one final sickening sip, and set it down hard.
Sign them over next weekend, or I burn your life to the ground. Have a pleasant evening.
Silas turned on his heel and walked out of the office. We listened to his footsteps echo down the hallway. The front door opened and closed with a heavy thud. The engine of his Lexus purred to life in the driveway, the tires crunching against the wet pavement as he backed out into the street. The house fell silent. I let out a long, shaky breath, the tension leaving my muscles so rapidly I felt dizzy. I looked at Liam. My husband did not look defeated. The fake exhaustion, the slumped posture, the defensive tone, all vanished the second the front door clicked shut. He sat up straight, a cold, sharp light burning in his eyes. He turned toward the wooden bookshelf. He walked over to the digital clock, reached behind the plastic casing, and pressed a small hidden button. A faint beep signaled the recording had stopped. Liam pulled the encrypted memory card from the hidden slot. He held the tiny square of plastic between his thumb and forefinger, examining it under the desk lamp. This microscopic piece of technology held everything. It held the confession of wire fraud. It held the admission of a fabricated child welfare report. It held the extortion threat. And it laid bare the illegal 40% contingency fee on a protected trust. I walked over and stood beside my husband.
Did it capture the audio clearly?
I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Liam slotted the memory card into his encrypted laptop. He opened the raw video file and skipped to the middle of the conversation. Silas Vane's voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable.
I orchestrated that first investigator visit to establish a baseline file. I told Patricia exactly what phrases to use.
The video quality was pristine. You could see the arrogant smirk. You could see the gold pen. You could see a corrupt man tying his own noose.
We have him,
Liam said softly, staring at the frozen image of the lawyer on the screen.
We have the wire fraud. We have the extortion. We have the contingency agreement.
He closed the laptop, securing the digital vault.
Now,
we prepare for a birthday party. We are going to let them walk right into our yard, surrounded by everyone we know. We are going to let them spring their trap, and then we are going to bury them in front of an audience.
Saturday arrived, bringing the heavy, sweet scent of blooming honeysuckle to our Nashville backyard. We strung yellow paper lanterns across the low-hanging oak branches. Wooden picnic tables were draped in checkered cloth. 40 people filled the space. These were not blood relatives. They were the pediatric nurses who sat with me during the darkest nights of the withdrawal phase. They were Liam's accounting firm partners who covered his shifts when he was too tired to drive. They were the neighbors who mowed our lawn when we were confined to the nursery. This was our village. They brought brightly wrapped packages and genuine laughter. Leo and Lily wore matching overalls, crawling across a thick quilt spread over the grass, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the fence line. I felt a tight knot in my stomach knowing what was coming. But Liam remained a steady presence beside me. He grilled burgers, joked with his colleagues, and played the part of the carefree father perfectly. His leather messenger bag rested on a patio chair near the house. The wooden side gate squeaked open an hour into the celebration. The casual chatter hovering over the yard faltered for a fraction of a second as 3 figures stepped onto the lawn. Patricia and Gerald did not dress for a child's backyard barbecue. My mother wore a pristine white linen sundress and wedge heels, her neck draped in delicate gold chains. Gerald sported tailored khaki trousers and a pressed navy polo shirt. Trailing just a half step behind them was Silas Vane. He traded his charcoal boardroom suit for a lighter gray blazer. But he still looked like a corporate shark prowling through a koi pond. He carried his signature slim leather briefcase. The sheer audacity of bringing their hired litigator to a first birthday party sent a fresh wave of cold clarity through my veins. They were not here to celebrate. They were here for an execution. Liam met my gaze from across the patio. He offered a single, almost imperceptible nod. Let them play their hand. I pasted a polite smile on my face and walked over to greet the uninvited guests. Patricia offered a stiff, hovering hug that ensured her white linen did not actually touch my cotton shirt. She did not look at the twins playing on the quilt. Her eyes were darting around the yard, calculating the audience, preparing her stage. I guided the afternoon along, keeping the tension buried under polite hostess duties. When the sun began to dip lower, casting long golden shadows across the grass, it was time for the main event. I placed 2 small, brightly frosted smash cakes on the wooden picnic table. Liam scooped up Leo and I lifted Lily. We carried them over to the table, surrounded by a ring of smiling faces. The guests closed in, holding up their phones to capture the milestone. The voices joined together, singing the birthday song. The melody was loud, slightly off-key, and filled with a raw, earned joy. Leo clapped his frosting-covered hands together. Lily stared wide-eyed at the single flickering candle illuminating her cake. For a fleeting moment, I let myself forget the looming threat. I looked at the 2 beautiful, resilient toddlers we had fought so hard to protect. We survived the neonatal intensive care unit. We survived the sleepless nights. We built a family out of the wreckage my sister left behind. The song reached its final crescendo. The guests cheered, clapping their hands. Liam leaned forward and helped Leo blow out the tiny flame. Before the applause could fade into normal conversation, the crowd shifted. Patricia pushed her way through the ring of our friends, breaking the circle. She stepped directly into the clearing by the picnic table. She did not hold a wrapped toy or a colorful gift bag. She held a thick, heavy manila envelope. The bright, happy chatter hovering in the air died out instantly. A heavy, uncomfortable silence descended over the yard. The only sound left was the eerie, dry rustle of the thick paper as my mother gripped the envelope in her manicured hands. She turned her body just enough so the entire audience could see her face. She was making sure she had the center stage. She extended her arm, thrusting the package toward my chest. "You need to open this, Bella," she announced.
Her voice was not pitched for a private family conversation. She projected her words, ensuring they carried all the way to the neighbor's fence. Her tone was sharp, commanding, and laced with a manufactured sorrow. I did not reach for the envelope. I stood holding Lily, my spine straight, refusing to shrink under the weight of her public spectacle. "What is this, Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and measured. Patricia let out a shaky, dramatic breath. She placed a hand over her heart, playing the role of the devastated, reluctant savior. "It is an emergency petition for full custody of my grandchildren." She declared, the words hanging like a guillotine over the silent yard. A collective murmur rippled through the guests. Liam stepped closer to me, his arm brushing against my shoulder. Patricia turned her gaze away from me and swept it across the crowd, performing directly for the gallery. "I cannot stand by and watch this continue," she cried out, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "I have tried to be supportive, but my daughter and her husband are drowning. They are financially ruined. They cannot afford to feed these babies properly. The state has already been out to investigate the squalor they are living in." I watched the faces of my friends and coworkers. A few looked shocked. Most looked deeply uncomfortable. Patricia was gambling on the societal reflex to avoid domestic drama. She thought our guests would lower their eyes, whisper their excuses, and shuffle out the side gate, leaving Liam and me isolated and humiliated. She thought shame would paralyze us. She wanted to isolate us from our support system right before she dropped the legal hammer. "These babies need a stable, affluent home," Patricia continued, pointing a manicured finger at the twins. "Clara would have wanted them safe. I am stepping in to save them from this sinking ship." She wiped a dry, invisible tear from the corner of her eye. She painted a masterpiece of deceit, wrapping her greed in the holy shroud of a grandmother's love. She thought she was delivering a fatal blow to my reputation. She assumed the threat of public disgrace would force me to sign whatever documents her lawyer produced just to make the scene end. She finished her monologue and took a step back, making room for her architect to finish the demolition. Silas Vane adjusted his gray blazer, stepping out from the shadow of the oak tree. The trap my mother thought she set was fully sprung. Silas Vane stepped out from the shadow of the low-hanging oak branches, leaving the perimeter of the yard and entering the center of our gathering. The heels of his expensive leather shoes pressed softly into the Bermuda grass. He did not look out of place standing next to a child's picnic table. He looked like a man who made a career out of invading spaces that belonged to other people. The late afternoon sun caught the silver edge of his watch dial as he moved. He walked with a practiced theatrical slowness, savoring the collective shock he had just walked into. "Mrs. Adams," Silas said. His voice was smooth, carrying a rich, resonant baritone that commanded immediate attention. It was a voice engineered for courtrooms and corporate boardrooms, designed to make the listener feel small and compliant. "We are trying to handle this delicate situation with as much grace as the law allows." He stopped 2 feet away from me. He stood tall, squaring his shoulders, projecting his words, not just to me, but to the 40 guests standing frozen around us. He was treating my friends and colleagues like a jury he needed to sway. "We possess documented proof of state investigations regarding your unfit environment," Silas announced, his tone shifting into a polished lecturing cadence. "The Department of Children's Services has a file detailing the hazardous conditions these infants are subjected to under your care. My client, your own mother, is prepared to execute an emergency custody transfer today. The paperwork is drafted and ready for a judge." He let the threat hang in the humid air. He wanted the words to sink in. He wanted the stigma of a state child welfare investigation to poison the yard. A heavy, suffocating silence gripped the crowd. My friend Sarah, a pediatric triage nurse who knew exactly how hard we fought to get Leo and Lily through their neonatal withdrawal, took a sudden protective step toward the picnic table. Her face was flushed with anger. Before she could intervene, Liam caught her eye. He offered a fraction of a head shake, a single silent command to hold her ground. Sarah froze, her expression shifting from fierce protection to deep confusion. She stepped back into the ring of guests, her fists clenched at her sides. Silas misinterpreted that silence. He saw the guests standing paralyzed and assumed he had conquered the yard. He thought he had successfully weaponized shame. He lifted his chin, reaching up with one hand to adjust the knot of his expensive silver silk tie. The gesture was casual, almost lazy. It was the movement of a man wrapping up a routine transaction. He was thoroughly enjoying the fear he believed he was inflicting upon us.
"You have a choice, Bella,"
Silas continued, dropping his hand from his tie and unlatching his slim leather briefcase. The brass locks opened with a sharp metallic click that echoed over the lawn.
"You can hand the children over to Patricia peacefully right now and spare everyone further trauma.
Or we can make this a scene for the local authorities. I am more than happy to dial the police and have them escort the minors from the premises in front of your neighborhood." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal documents, holding them up like a trophy. He was banking on the shock and awe of a public confrontation. He analyzed me and saw just a physical therapist, a young woman who would crumble under the threat of uniformed officers taking her babies. He analyzed my husband and saw just a man with a spreadsheet, a defeated accountant who had surrendered in a dim home office 2 days prior. Silas believed his own narrative. He thought our previous offer to walk away for a cash buyout was an act of genuine desperation. He felt invincible because he thought he was fighting a broken couple. The dramatic irony hovering in the backyard was a tangible force. The crowd surrounding us was horrified. The guests were holding their breath, their faces pale with secondhand panic, watching a nightmare unfold over a first birthday party. But inside my own mind, there was no panic. There was only a cold, sharp clarity. The adrenaline pumping through my veins was not the frantic energy of a cornered animal. It was the quiet focus of a hunter watching a predator step directly into a snare. I looked at Patricia. My mother stood behind her lawyer, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, playing the tragic heroine. Gerald stood beside her, staring at the grass, too cowardly to meet my gaze. They really believed they had won. They thought this ambush was the final stroke of their masterpiece. Silas was not finished. He needed to twist the knife. He needed to ensure I had no social standing left to fight back. He unfolded the top page of his legal stack, pretending to read from the official petition. "It is a tragedy when young parents bite off more than they can chew." Sigh. Silas preached to the silent crowd, shaking his head in mock sorrow. "But the financial realities are undeniable. Crushing credit card debt, overdue utility, notices a looming second mortgage. You cannot provide a stable foundation for these twins, Bella. Your mother is offering a wealthy, secure harbor. Do not let your pride ruin these babies' lives. Sign the relinquishment forms." He was using the exact financial draft Liam had fabricated and handed to him during our fake surrender. Silas thought those numbers were his ultimate leverage. He had no idea he was reading a script my husband wrote for him. The scent of the extinguished birthday candle wax drifted across the patio, mingling with the smell of charcoal from the grill. I held Lily tighter against my hip. She reached out her tiny fingers, playing with the collar of my shirt, entirely unaware of the corrupt man trying to dictate her future. Leo was sitting on the picnic table next to the smash cake, babbling happily at a yellow paper lantern swaying in the breeze. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not drop to my knees and beg for mercy. I maintained a perfect, terrifying calm. I looked Silas Vane directly in his eyes. I let the silence stretch for 5 long seconds, denying him the frantic response he craved. The smirk on his face faltered for a fraction of an inch. My lack of fear confused him. It did not fit his equation.
Are you going to make me dial the police, Mrs. Adams?
Silas demanded, his smooth tone cracking to reveal a sharp, impatient edge. This is your final opportunity to resolve this with dignity. I did not answer him. I did not need to. I turned my head and looked across the patio toward the grill. Liam was leaning against the brick retaining wall. His posture was relaxed. His arms were not crossed in defense. He watched Silas with the detached clinical interest of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. When my eyes met his, Liam knew it was time. He pushed himself off the brick wall. He did not rush. He walked with measured, deliberate steps toward the patio chair where he had left his belongings. Silas turned his head, following my gaze, his brow furrowing as he watched my husband move. The lawyer expected a plea for negotiations. He expected a broken man to intervene and beg for more time. He did not expect Liam to reach down, grip the leather handle of his messenger bag, and pull the zipper open. Liam did not flinch. While Silas Vane stood in the center of our yard delivering his ultimatum, my husband moved with the fluid, unhurried grace of a man walking a highly familiar path. He stepped closer to me, reaching out his strong arms. I transferred Lily into his embrace. Liam held our daughter for a brief second, pressing a soft kiss to her curls before turning and handing her gently to Sarah. Our friend received the toddler, pulling her safely out of the immediate crossfire. Liam then turned his back on the lawyer. He walked over to the wooden patio chair where he had left his weathered leather messenger bag. The yard was so devoid of sound that every small noise amplified: the rustle of the oak leaves, the distant hum of a lawnmower blocks away. Then came the sharp metallic sound of Liam pulling the heavy zipper across the track of his bag. That singular noise echoed like a rifle cocking in the tense, humid air. It was the sound of the trap snapping shut. Silas narrowed his eyes, watching my husband. The lawyer was accustomed to tears. He was used to panic negotiations, raised voices, and desperate pleas for leniency. He did not know how to process a target who turned his back and casually opened a briefcase. Liam reached inside the leather compartment. He did not pull out a checkbook. He did not retrieve the voluntary relinquishment form Silas had demanded. He pulled out a thick, spiral-bound dossier. The stack of paper was heavy, secured with a clear plastic cover. It represented weeks of sleepless nights, glowing computer monitors, and relentless data extraction. It was the physical manifestation of my husband's expertise. Liam turned around and walked back toward the center of the patio. He bypassed Patricia entirely, treating my mother like the irrelevant pawn she had just become. He stopped directly in front of Silas Vane. The height difference was negligible, but Liam suddenly seemed to tower over the litigator.
Mr. Vane.
Liam said, his voice carrying a chilling, detached precision. It was the tone he used when presenting audit findings to a hostile board of directors. It stripped all emotion from the air, leaving only cold, hard facts.
I was hoping Patricia brought you today,
Silas frowned, his manicured hands tightening around the handle of his own briefcase.
Excuse me,
the lawyer replied, the smooth veneer of his confidence showing a microscopic hairline fracture.
I am guessing Patricia did not brief you on my professional background.
Liam continued, his tone conversational, almost polite.
She tends to overlook details that do not serve her immediate narrative. You see,
I do not just balance spreadsheets. I am a forensic accountant. I specialize in corporate fraud, hidden asset recovery, and financial extortion.
I trace dirty money for a living.
A murmur rippled through the ring of our friends and coworkers. Several of Liam's firm partners stood in the crowd watching their colleague do what he did best. Silas shifted his weight. The silver watch on his wrist flashed in the sunlight. He tried to maintain his arrogant posture, but his eyes darted toward the bound dossier in Liam's hands. "And because I track fraud for a living," Liam said, taking a deliberate step closer, "I know that when dealing with predators, you never meet them in the light. You invite them into the shadows and let them talk." "I am guessing you forgot about our little off-the-record consultation on Tuesday evening." "I did not forget our meeting." Silas snapped, his voice losing its theatrical resonance. "You begged for a cash buyout to walk away from your children. You showed me your financial ruin. I showed you a fabricated draft I typed up 20 minutes before you arrived," Liam corrected smoothly. "I played a desperate broken man because that is the only language you respond to. You looked at my wife and me and you saw easy marks. You saw a terrified young couple you could bully into submission. You were so eager to secure your payout that you stopped looking for anomalies." Liam lifted the heavy dossier and held it out. Silas did not want to take it, but the pressure of 40 witnesses watching his every move forced his hand. The lawyer reached out his fingers, brushing the plastic cover, and accepted the stack of paper. "Turn to the third tab," Liam instructed. Silas hesitated, his jaw clenching. He flipped open the dossier. His eyes scanned the top page of the designated section. I watched the blood drain from his face. The healthy, confident flush of his skin vanished, replaced by a sickly pale chalk color. His eyes widened, darting back and forth across the printed lines of text. "That is a certified transcript," Liam announced, turning his head so his voice carried across the yard to every single guest. "It is a word-for-word record of the conversation we held in my home office. It features you, Mr. Vane, laughing at the idea of a buyout. It features you detailing exactly how you orchestrated an anonymous state child welfare report to manufacture a crisis." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Sarah covered her mouth with her free hand, her eyes darting between Liam and the lawyer. The guests who had felt uncomfortable just moments before now stared at Silas with naked disgust. The polished high-end litigator was being stripped bare in front of an audience. "Keep reading," Liam urged, his voice dropping into a lethal quiet register. "Read the part where you detail your payment structure." Silas could not speak. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. He was staring at his own spoken words immortalized in black ink. "Since you seem to have lost your voice, I will share it with the group," Liam said. "On Tuesday, you admitted that you do not work for a standard retainer. You admitted that Patricia agreed to give your firm a 40% contingency cut of the $2.8 million wrongful death settlement currently sitting in an orphan's trust. Over $1 million stolen from 2 infants, all facilitated by a fraudulent custody transfer." Patricia let out a sharp, panicked gasp. She stepped backward, her wedge heels sinking into the soft soil. She looked around the yard, realizing the narrative had just slipped violently out of her control. She was no longer the tragic, loving grandmother saving her family. She was the architect of $1 million theft exposed in the afternoon sun. "But we have not even reached the best part," Liam said, tapping the edge of the dossier still resting in the lawyer's trembling hands. "Flip to the next page." Silas did not move. He was frozen, his expensive gray blazer suddenly looking 2 sizes too big. Liam reached over, grabbed the corner of the page, and flipped it for him. "That section highlights your admission regarding the guardian authorization forms," Liam stated, his forensic precision cutting through the remaining silence. "You stood in my house and acknowledged that Patricia forged my signature and my wife's signature to bypass the legal trust restrictions. You admitted you took those forged documents and submitted them to the insurance conglomerate.
Liam took one step back, letting the gravity of the crime settle over the yard.
That is not a simple family court dispute, Mr. Vane,
Liam declared.
That is identity theft. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. When you transmitted those forged documents to the insurance adjusters across state lines, you committed federal wire fraud.
The silver silk tie around Silas Vane's neck suddenly looked like a tightening noose. His breathing grew shallow and rapid. The man who had walked into my backyard treating my family like a lucrative business transaction was experiencing the sheer terror of losing his career, his license, and his freedom. Patricia pushed her way forward, her face flushed a dark, angry crimson. She realized her hired gun was failing her. She needed to regain the stage. "He is lying!" Patricia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Liam. "He printed out a piece of paper with fake quotes. He is trying to manipulate you all. This is exactly the kind of unstable, toxic behavior I am trying to rescue these babies from." She turned to Silas, grabbing the sleeve of his blazer. "Tell them," Patricia demanded, her voice shrill and desperate. "Tell them it is a fake document. You are a lawyer. Do something." Silas swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing against his starched white collar. He looked at the 40 faces staring at him. He looked at the man standing across from him, realizing he had walked blindfolded into a minefield. He tried to summon his courtroom arrogance, pulling on the last shreds of his plausible deniability.
"This is an outrage,"
Silas stammered, his voice lacking its previous resonance.
"A typed transcript proves nothing. Anyone can type a fictional conversation onto a piece of paper. You have no hard evidence to support these defamatory accusations. You have no proof of my actual words." Silas stood a little taller, clinging to the hope that Liam had merely bluffed his way through the confrontation. He thought it was just a battle of his word against ours. He did not realize the trap contained a secondary mechanism. I stood quietly near the picnic table, watching the corrupt attorney attempt his final retreat. I reached into the pocket of my jeans and wrapped my fingers around the small black plastic remote control for the patio television. Silas wanted proof of his actual words. He was about to get it. Silas stood a little taller, clinging to the desperate hope that Liam had merely bluffed his way through the confrontation. The lawyer demanded physical proof. He wanted hard evidence of the hidden recording, assuming my husband was relying on intimidation rather than actual documentation. Liam did not raise his voice. He simply tapped the thick-bound dossier resting in the trembling hands of the corrupt attorney. The camera was housed inside the modern digital clock on the wooden bookshelf right behind your left shoulder. Liam explained, his tone conversational and devoid of malice. "The raw video and audio files were uploaded to a secure encrypted server the exact moment your vehicle left our driveway on Tuesday. You are staring at the paper copy because the digital original is already queued for the State Ethics Committee and the federal authorities." The remaining color drained from Silas Vane's face. His complexion shifted from a pale chalk to a sickly translucent gray. The realization that he had been recorded in high definition and with crystal clear audio effectively severed his vocal cords. He looked down at the dossier in his hands like he was holding a live explosive. The arrogant smirk that had defined his features for the past 20 minutes dissolved into naked, unvarnished terror. Patricia, however, refused to concede. My mother always believed that if she screamed loud enough, reality would simply bend to her will. She stepped around the paralyzed lawyer, her pristine white linen sundress swishing against the Bermuda grass. She turned her back on Liam, realizing he was an impenetrable fortress, and aimed her performance directly at the 40 guests ringing our patio. "Do not listen to them," Patricia pleaded. Her voice cracked with a masterclass level of feigned agony. "Liam is a forensic accountant. He knows how to manipulate data. He knows how to fabricate spreadsheets and forge transcripts.
They are trying to distract you from the truth. These babies are living in squalor, and Bella is too unstable to realize the danger she put them in. I am their biological grandmother. I am just trying to save my grandbabies from a sinking ship before it is too late." She reached her arms out toward the crowd, begging for an ally. Her eyes darted from face to face, meeting the stares of the pediatric nurses, the accountants, the neighbors. She was searching for a single nod of sympathy, a single person who bought her fabricated narrative of rescue and devotion. I stood quietly near the picnic table. The remnants of the birthday celebration surrounded me. The yellow paper lanterns swayed gently overhead in the warm breeze. The 2 small smash cakes sat ruined on the wooden planks, blue frosting melting under the late afternoon sun. Leo and Lily were safe in the arms of my closest friends, shielded from the visual ugliness of the moment. I reached into the front pocket of my jeans, my fingers wrapped around the small black plastic remote control for the patio television. We had mounted a large flat screen under the covered awning the night before. The original plan was to play a digital slideshow during the cake cutting. I had spent weeks compiling photos of the twins. The files contained images of their first smiles, their first baths, and the triumphant day they finally reached a healthy weight threshold. It was supposed to be a visual testament to their resilience and our new family. I bypassed that file entirely. I stepped away from the picnic table and walked across the grass toward my mother. Patricia stopped her frantic pleading when she saw me move. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, preparing for a shouting match. She expected a daughter throwing a tantrum. She wanted a screaming match to validate her claims of my emotional instability. "You want to talk about saving your grandbabies, Mom?" I asked. My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The yard was so incredibly quiet you could hear the distant muted hum of traffic from the interstate miles away. "You want to stand in my yard surrounded by the people who actually helped me keep them alive and play the savior?" I continued, stopping 3 feet away from her. Patricia opened her mouth to issue another shrill denial. I raised my hand and pressed the play button on the remote control. The large television screen under the awning flared to life. It did not display a montage of happy, healthy toddlers. It did not play a cheerful lullaby track. The screen filled with the stark, unflattering fluorescent lighting of a rehabilitation clinic room. A collective, sharp intake of breath swept through the yard. Every single head turned toward the awning. The image on the screen was visceral and haunting. It was my sister. Clara sat on a narrow institutional bed, drowning in a faded, oversized hospital gown. Her collarbones cut sharp angles against her pale, sickly skin. Her dark hair hung in thin, unwashed patches around her face. She looked directly into the camera lens. Her eyes were sunken, swimming with a raw, unfiltered terror that no Hollywood actor could ever replicate. The patio speakers hummed, amplifying her raspy, broken voice across the manicured lawn. "It is Tuesday," Clara whispered through the speakers. Her eyes darted nervously toward the closed door in the video background. "Mom and Dad came to visit today. They did not bring any clothes. They did not ask how the therapy is going. They brought a man with them." Patricia froze. Her entire body turned to stone. The perfectly curated mask of the grieving grandmother shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She stared at the screen, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. Clara's voice continued echoing over the festive birthday decorations. They timed it. They waited until right after the nurse gave me my afternoon medication. When my head started swimming, Mom put a legal pad on my lap. She pressed a pen into my fingers. She told me if I did not sign the papers, they would stop paying for this bed and put me out on the street. I watched the faces of my friends and colleagues. The discomfort that had previously clouded their expressions morphed into pure, unadulterated horror. Sarah tightened her protective grip on Lily, her eyes wide with shock. Liam's accounting partners stared at the television, their jaws tight, processing the sheer depravity of the scheme. The video transitioned to the final diary entry. Clara looked even worse. Tears tracked a slow path through the dust on her hollow cheeks. "They are watching me!" My deceased sister sobbed through the speakers, her voice breaking with despair. "They do not want me to get better, Bella. They are angry about the money they spent on me. They are trying to find a way to get it back. They are building something. They are trapping me." Clara leaned closer to the laptop camera, her face filling the entire television screen. It was a plea from beyond the grave delivered directly to the very people trying to exploit her absence. "If anything happens to me," Clara begged, her voice a desperate rasping command, "never let them touch my children! Never let them touch that money!" The screen faded to a harsh final black. The audio cut out, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. The dry legal documents in Liam's dossier proved the financial crime. The printed transcripts proved the extortion. But Clara's voice from the grave destroyed my parents' souls. The transition of power was irreversible. There was no argument Patricia could fabricate to counter the haunting reality of her own daughter's terror. The narrative of the wealthy, stable, loving grandparents was incinerated, leaving only the charred remains of their bottomless greed. Gerald, who had stood silently behind Patricia for the entire confrontation, finally moved. He took a stumbling step backward. He looked physically ill. His pristine navy polo shirt seemed to cling to a man who had suddenly aged 10 years in 2 minutes. He could not look at the blank television screen. He could not look at me. He stared at the grass, a coward realizing the bill for his passive complicity had just come due. Patricia looked at the crowd. She tried to raise her hands, tried to form a sentence, but the audience had already rendered their verdict. 40 people stared back at her with a unified, blistering disgust. Nobody whispered. Nobody looked away. They held her gaze, offering nothing but sheer revulsion. My mother was a woman who built her entire identity on social standing. She lived for the approval of her church groups, her country club peers, and her neighborhood associations. Standing in my backyard, stripped of her disguise and exposed as a predator who hunted her own flesh and blood, she experienced a profound and devastating isolation. The trap had not just closed around them, it had crushed them. The silence stretching across the backyard was absolute. The horrifying revelation of Clara's final video diary hung in the humid Tennessee air, dismantling every lie my parents had constructed. Patricia stood frozen on the lawn, the pristine white fabric of her sundress glowing under the fading afternoon light. She looked toward her hired litigator, desperately seeking a lifeline, but Silas Vane was not looking at her. The high-end attorney who had strutted onto my patio 20 minutes prior, radiating sheer arrogance, was staring at my husband with unvarnished panic. "I have already forwarded the entire dossier, the audio transcripts, and the raw video files to the State Bar Ethics Committee," Liam announced. His voice was soft, devoid of any anger, which only made the statement more terrifying. He stood with his arms relaxed at his sides, addressing the lawyer directly. "I also carbon copied the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically their Financial Crimes Division. I highlighted the admission of wire fraud and the illegal contingency fee. They are expecting your call by Monday morning, Mr. Vane." Silas did not argue. He did not issue a counter-threat or attempt to preserve his professional dignity. The survival instinct of a cornered criminal overrode his courtroom training. He looked down at the thick manila envelope containing the emergency custody petition he had intended to serve. He dropped it. The heavy envelope hit the Bermuda grass with a dull thud. He let go of his slim leather briefcase. It tumbled to the ground, the brass locks flashing in the sun. He turned on his heel and ran. It was not a dignified exit. He sprinted across the yard, his expensive gray blazer flapping around his waist, his leather shoes slipping slightly on the damp grass. He bypassed the wooden side gate, pushed through the rhododendron bushes, and scrambled towards the driveway. The heavy thud of his car door slamming shut echoed across the property. Seconds later, the powerful engine of his black Lexus roared to life. The tires screeched against the asphalt, leaving dark rubber streaks on our street as he fled the neighborhood, abandoning his clients to face the wreckage he had helped engineer. The departure of their architect broke whatever remaining resolve Patricia possessed. Her shoulders slumped. The theatrical posture of the grieving, heroic grandmother dissolved entirely. She was suddenly just an older woman drowning in debt, standing in a yard full of people who now knew she had attempted to traffic her own grandchildren for a multi-million-dollar settlement. Patricia looked toward the crowd. She tried to locate a friendly face, someone who would offer a shred of grace. She turned toward Sarah, the pediatric nurse who had been holding Lily. Sarah stepped backward, shielding the infant with her body, her face twisted in absolute revulsion. Patricia turned toward the women from her church group, the very women who had baked her casseroles and validated her social media grief. They averted their eyes. The judgment was silent but utterly unanimous. The community she had spent decades cultivating was turning its back on her in real time. "Bella, please," Patricia stammered, her voice cracking into a high, thin pitch. She reached her hands out toward me. Her manicured fingers were trembling violently. "You have to understand, we were desperate. The real estate developers took everything. We were going to lose the house. We just needed the trust money to stay afloat. We would have let you visit the babies. We would have worked out an arrangement." She was bargaining. She was stripping away the final layer of her disguise, admitting the entire custody crusade was nothing but a financial transaction. She confirmed Clara's worst fears, validating the horror we had just witnessed on the television screen. I did not scream. I did not hurl insults. I felt a profound, bone-deep exhaustion mixed with a chilling sense of closure. The battle was over. The fortress was secure. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. Patricia flinched, anticipating a physical strike. I reached into the front pocket of my jeans. I pulled out the small yellow plastic band. The ink was faded, smudged from months of me rubbing my thumb across it during the darkest hours of the neonatal withdrawal phase. I reached out and took my mother's trembling right hand. I turned her palm upward and dropped the tiny medical tracking bracelet onto her skin. "You dropped this at the hospital," I whispered, keeping my voice so low that only she and Gerald could hear the words. "You knocked it off the tray table when you were posing for a photo. You did not even bend down to pick it up. You never cared about them. You only cared about what they could do for your image, and then you cared about what they could do for your bank account." Patricia stared at the yellow plastic resting in her palm. It was the ultimate, irrefutable symbol of her failure as a mother and a grandmother. Her lip quivered, but the tears that finally spilled down her cheeks were not born of grief. They were born of absolute, devastating defeat. "Leave my property," I commanded, "and do not ever attempt to contact my family again." I turned my back on her and walked toward Liam. I did not wait to see her reaction. I heard the crunch of the grass as Gerald finally moved. He placed a heavy, defeated hand on Patricia's shoulder and steered her toward the side gate. They walked out of the yard, navigating through the silent crowd. The guests parted like the Red Sea, refusing to offer a single word of farewell or comfort. The gate clicked shut behind them, sealing their exile.
The tension in the backyard began to dissipate, replaced by a collective exhale. Sarah walked over and handed Lily back into my arms. The toddler buried her face in my neck, completely insulated from the toxicity that had just been purged from her life. Liam wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me tight against his side. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head, a silent acknowledgement of the victory. We survived the ambush. We dismantled the threat, but the exposure of my parents' crimes was only the first phase of the reckoning. The legal and financial machinery Liam had set into motion was about to initiate the final sequence of consequences. Patricia and Gerald had tried to use the state to steal my children. They were about to discover exactly what happens when that very same state turns its investigative power toward them. Patricia and Gerald walked out of the wooden side gate, and the heavy iron latch clicked shut behind them. That sharp metallic sound marked the precise moment the siege ended. The tension that had suffocated our backyard all afternoon lifted, carried away by the early evening breeze. Our guests did not immediately resume the party. There was no sudden return to cheerful music or casual conversation. Instead, they mobilized. Sarah and the other nurses quietly began packing up the ruined smash cakes and clearing the scattered paper plates. Liam's accounting partners folded the wooden chairs and stacked them neatly against the brick retaining wall. Our village recognized the emotional toll the afternoon had taken on us, and they stepped in to restore order to our physical space without needing to be asked. By the time the sun began to dip below the tree line, casting long golden shadows across the lawn, the yard was clean. The guests offered quiet hugs, warm smiles, and soft words of support before driving away, leaving us in perfect, unbroken peace. But the quiet of Sunday was merely the deep breath before the final strike. Liam and I did not spend the weekend celebrating. We spent it preparing the final legal maneuvers. When Monday morning arrived, the architecture of my parents' destruction was fully deployed. Liam walked into the downtown federal building carrying his weathered leather messenger bag. He bypassed the local precinct and went directly to the regional field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He sat in a sterile interview room and handed a digital storage drive to an agent specializing in financial crimes. The drive contained the high-definition video from our home office, the crisp audio recording of the extortion threat, and the detailed forensic map Liam had drawn, linking the forged signatures to the offshore insurance conglomerate. He then transmitted the exact same files to the Tennessee State Bar Ethics Committee. Silas Vane never saw the inside of a courtroom as a practicing attorney again. The state suspended his law license before the week concluded, citing overwhelming evidence of fraud and extortion. The federal authorities indicted him shortly after. The arrogant litigator who had stood in my yard and threatened to have police drag my babies away was forced to surrender his passport and pay a steep bail to avoid waiting for his trial in a holding cell. The sleek black car, the tailored suits, and the expensive silk ties could not shield him from the sheer weight of his own recorded confession. He was ruined by his own arrogance. With their architect removed from the board, Patricia and Gerald were left entirely defenseless. The very weapon my mother had tried to wield against me was turned back upon her with devastating precision. Liam took the printed transcripts and Clara's haunting video diaries straight to the Department of Children's Services. He requested an emergency meeting with the regional director. He laid out the documented proof that my parents had initiated a fabricated child welfare report to manipulate a custody transfer for financial gain. The state does not look kindly upon citizens who weaponize their resources to commit fraud against the system. The department opened a full aggressive investigation into Patricia and Gerald. They did not just look at the falsified report, they delved into the historical context. They reviewed Clara's video diaries, examining the clear evidence of elder and dependent financial exploitation. The investigators interviewed the nursing staff at the rehabilitation clinic, confirming the aggressive, predatory behavior my parents exhibited during their visits to their dying daughter. The outcome was swift and permanent. The family court judge reviewing the state findings issued a binding, irrevocable order. Patricia and Gerald were permanently blacklisted from the foster and adoption registries. They were barred from ever obtaining custody, guardianship, or unsupervised visitation of any minor in the state of Tennessee. The legal wall I had desperately wanted to build in that cheap notary office was finally replaced by a fortress of state-mandated protection. My parents were legally severed from their own niece and nephew forever. The social and legal ruin was compounded by their imminent financial collapse. The specialty lender who provided the bridge loan for their luxury recreational vehicle caught wind of the federal fraud investigation. Lenders who deal in high-risk short-term capital do not wait around for criminal trials. They demanded immediate repayment. The $2.8 million wrongful death settlement, which Patricia had used as collateral, was officially flagged as a frozen asset tied to a federal crime, placing it entirely out of their reach. My parents had no liquid cash. Their credit cards were maxed, and their house carried a second mortgage they could not afford to pay. The facade of affluent country club stability crumbled into dust. They were forced to sell the pristine 40-foot motor home back to the dealership at a severe depreciation just to cover the initial loan penalties. The remaining funds were quickly drained to retain criminal defense attorneys to fight the impending forgery charges. They traded their designer clothes for modest attire, hiding inside their mortgaged house, alienated from the church groups and social circles they had spent decades trying to impress. They lost the money, they lost their standing, and they lost their family. The settlement funds from Clara's passing were finally released by the insurance conglomerate 6 months later. Because Liam and I were the undisputed permanent legal guardians, the transition was seamless. We did not touch a single penny for our own expenses. Liam worked with a trusted fiduciary to establish an ironclad, untouchable educational trust for Leo and Lily. The money was locked behind layers of rigorous legal protection, ensuring it would only be accessible when the twins reached adulthood. Clara's tragic loss was transformed into a guaranteed, secure future for the children she left behind. Her final wish, whispered into a laptop camera in a sterile clinic room, was honored and enforced. But all of those legal victories and financial resolutions belong to the future. On that humid Saturday evening, right after the last guest departed and the side gate clicked shut, the only thing that mattered was the present moment. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Nashville sky in brilliant shades of bruised purple and burnt orange. The warm evening air settled over the backyard. Liam and I sat down on the thick quilt spread over the grass. We were exhausted, our bodies heavy with the adrenaline crash, but our minds were lighter than they had been in over 14 months. Leo and Lily sat between us. They were wearing their matching denim overalls, completely unaware of the war that had just been fought and won for their safety. The ruined smash cake sat on the wooden picnic table nearby, but the twins had managed to save a few handfuls of the bright blue icing. Leo babbled a happy, incoherent string of syllables. He crawled across the quilt, his small knees pressing into the soft fabric. He reached up with a chubby, frosting-covered hand and slapped it directly onto Liam's nose. A thick smear of bright blue sugar coated my husband's face. Liam froze, blinking in surprise. He looked at Leo, then crossed his eyes, trying to look at the blue mess on his own nose. He let out a loud, genuine laugh. It was a rich, unburdened sound that I had not heard since before the midnight hospital phone call. Lily chimed in, giggling at the silly noise, clapping her clean hands together. I sat back on the grass and watched them. I watched the man who had methodically dismantled a criminal conspiracy, wearing blue frosting on his face with immense pride. I watched the two resilient toddlers who had survived an impossible beginning finding pure joy in the simplest moments. We were no longer a young couple struggling to survive the wreckage of a tragedy. The toxic biological ties that had threatened to pull us under were permanently severed. In their place, we had built something far stronger. We had constructed a sanctuary based on choice sacrifice and fierce protection. As the fireflies began to blink in the shadows of the oak branches, I knew the nightmare was finally over. We were safe grounded and perfectly secure within the architecture of our true family. When the last guest departs a shattered backyard celebration and the paper lanterns sway silently in the quiet evening breeze, a profound and unsettling stillness settles over the grass. The story of Bella, Liam, Patricia, and Gerald is not just a sensational tale of suburban betrayal. It is a dark, reflective mirror held up to the modern American family. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable space between the curated lives we project and the gritty, unvarnished realities of authentic love. As we sift through the ashes of this fractured family tree, a vital roadmap emerges for navigating parenting values, familial responsibility, and the long-term guidance of our children in a culture dangerously obsessed with appearances. We are raised on a very specific, deeply ingrained cultural myth, the belief that the biological family is an unbreakable, inherently righteous sanctuary. But the tragedy of Clara and the subsequent exploitation of her newborn twins serve as a stark warning about the toxicity of the image. Patricia and Gerald represent a growing epidemic in modern parenting, where societal reputation and digital validation completely eclipse genuine sacrificial care. Patricia was a woman obsessed with the optics of grief. She utilized her infant grandchildren as aesthetic props, dressing them in itchy boutique lace to harvest sympathy casseroles and prayer emojis from her online audience. Yet when the camera flashed and the screen went dark, she handed the screaming children back entirely absent from the bone-deep exhaustion of 3 a.m. feedings and the agonizing tremors of neonatal withdrawal. The lesson here is absolute and unforgiving. True parenting is not a performance. It is not found in the curated perfection of a digital feed. Authentic parenting is found in the quiet, desperate hours of the night. It is the grit, the patience, and the emotional awareness required to rock a withdrawing, trembling infant until the sun comes up. It requires a radical honesty with oneself and one's children, an acknowledgement that love is an action, a verb measured in sweat, sleeplessness, and profound personal sacrifice. Furthermore, this narrative violently dismantles the traditional, sometimes toxic, expectation of financial entitlement across generations. In many traditional viewpoints, children are subconsciously viewed as a safety net, an extension of the parent's own legacy and security. However, Patricia and Gerald warped this concept into something grotesque. They viewed their struggling daughter and subsequently their orphaned grandchildren as exploitable financial assets. They were willing to mortgage the innocence and security of 2 infants to cover the debts of their own failed, luxurious investments. Real family education must teach the exact opposite. The sacred duty of a parent is to build a fortress for the next generation. It is to absorb the hardships of the present to guarantee the security of the future, not to cannibalize a child's inheritance to pay for an $80,000 recreational vehicle. From the perspective of Bella and Liam, we are handed a master class in modern self-defense, offering crucial guidance for young adults navigating toxic family structures. We are taught to respect our elders unconditionally, but Bella's journey redefines what traditional values must look like in the modern era. We must teach our youth that biology does not equal family. A toxic biological tie is not a life sentence. It is a circumstance.
True family is a status earned through fierce protection, emotional safety, and mutual respect. When blood relatives become predators, cutting those ties is not an act of betrayal. It is the ultimate act of moral integrity. Bella and Liam built their true village, not from blood, but from the nurses' colleagues and neighbors who showed up when it mattered. Equally important is the lesson of competence as a shield. Liam's expertise as a forensic accountant was not just a career. It was the weapon that saved his children. We must guide the next generation to invest deeply in their education, their logic, and their professional skills. In a world increasingly populated by emotional manipulators and gaslighters, raw emotion is rarely enough to win the war. Data legal literacy and meticulous preparation are the most effective antidotes to deception. The story teaches us to document everything in an era of whispers and denied truths. Clara's digital video diary and Liam's hidden recordings provided the undeniable written proof required to survive a network of professional liars. This story also begs us to break the generational cycle of silence. For decades, the cornerstone of the traditional American family has been the phrase, "keep it in the family." We are taught to hide our dirty laundry, to protect the abusers in our bloodlines, to save face in front of the neighbors. But keeping the peace at the expense of the truth only protects the guilty. By exposing the architecture of her parents' lies, Bella achieved a sacred poetic justice. She protected the inheritance and the emotional safety of the next generation by refusing to be complicit in the silence. If this story stirs something deep within you, if you have ever looked at a polished family portrait and recognized the silent, invisible scars hidden just outside the frame, then you understand why these narratives must be told. We cannot heal what we refuse to acknowledge. If you believe in prioritizing raw, honest authenticity over toxic tradition, and if you stand for the fierce protection of the vulnerable, I invite you to join our community. Follow Sophia's Vengeance, subscribe to our channel, engage with our stories, and help us continue to shine a brilliant, unforgiving light into the dark corners of the modern family dynamic. Together, we can redefine what it means to truly protect our own. As we reflect on the shattered remnants of Patricia and Gerald's legacy, we are left with a lingering, uncomfortable truth that challenges the very foundation of how we view our lineages. We are conditioned from birth to believe that we owe our parents an unpayable debt simply for bringing us into the world. We are told that blood is thicker than water, a phrase weaponized to demand loyalty in the face of profound abuse. But consider this: blood is merely an accident of biology. Water, however, is what actually nourishes. Water is what cleanses. Water is the element we choose to drink to keep ourselves alive. We do not owe our loyalty to the soil simply because we were planted there, especially if that soil is poisoned. Conventional wisdom insists that the ultimate goal of a family is preservation at all costs. But perhaps the truest, most profound act of family devotion isn't preservation at all. Perhaps when the roots are entirely rotted and the branches bear nothing but poison, the highest form of love you can offer your children isn't to honor the family tree. It is having the cold, terrifying courage to burn the entire tree down so that you might finally have enough fertile ground to plant something real.